A mafia boss who built an empire on blood and control made one fatal mistake. He saved a dying woman from the Chicago snow. Now the most dangerous man in the city is about to lose everything he ever fought for, not to bullets or betrayal, but to something far more terrifying: love. This is the story of Vincent DeLuca and Evelyn Hart, where mercy becomes weakness and weakness becomes war. Stay until the end to see if love can survive in a world built on violence. Hit the like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The snow fell like broken glass across Chicago's south side, cutting through the February night with the kind of cold that didn't just freeze skin, it cracked bones. Vincent DeLuca stepped out of the unmarked steel door on the east side of Mercy General Hospital, though the building hadn't been called that in years. Not officially. The hospital still treated legitimate patients on floors 1 through 6, but floors 7 through 9 belonged to Vincent. Those floors didn't exist on any city record. No insurance companies billed them. No inspectors ever climbed those stairs. Those floors saved lives the legal system had already written off. Vincent pulled his black wool coat tighter against the wind, his breath visible in the frozen air. Behind him, the door locked automatically with a mechanical click that echoed down the empty alley. He'd just overseen a surgery that didn't officially happen, a bullet removal from the spine of a 15-year-old kid caught in crossfire between two crews fighting over territory. Vincent didn't even care about anymore. The kid would walk again. His mother would never know who paid for it. That's how Vincent preferred things. Anonymous, controlled, clean. He moved toward the street where his driver waited in the black Cadillac Escalade, its engine idling, exhaust rising like smoke signals in the freezing night. The vehicle's windows were tinted dark enough to be illegal, armored enough to survive a rocket launcher. Vincent had made enemies in every direction during his 15 years running the DeLuca operation. Some of those enemies were dead now. Others were smart enough to stay quiet, but Vincent trusted none of them. The streetlights barely penetrated the falling snow. The city felt abandoned, like even the criminals had enough sense to stay inside tonight. Vincent's Italian leather shoes crunched through the ice as he crossed the empty street, his gray eyes scanning the shadows out of habit. 20 years in this life had taught him that danger didn't announce itself with sirens and spotlights. It came quiet. It came when you stopped paying attention. He was 3 steps from the Escalade when he saw it. A body. Slumped against the alley wall across the street, half buried in snow that had already started covering it like a burial shroud. Vincent slowed. His hand instinctively moved toward the Glock 19 holstered beneath his coat, fingers brushing the grip. Chicago's winter was brutal enough to kill a homeless person every week. He'd seen plenty of bodies, frozen junkies, drunks who passed out in the wrong place. This wasn't his problem. He took another step toward the SUV, then he stopped. Something about the shape was wrong. The clothing wasn't the usual layers of torn jackets and garbage bags the homeless wore for insulation. This looked like a regular coat, thin, cheap, but normal. The kind a college kid might wear. The kind someone wore when they didn't expect to be outside long. Vincent's jaw tightened. He glanced at the Escalade. His driver Marco was watching him through the windshield with a questioning expression. Vincent could get in the car right now, drive away, pretend he never saw anything. He had a meeting in 40 minutes with his accountant. He had shipments coming in from the docks that needed his signature. He had an empire that ran on precision and discipline, and stopping to check on every frozen body in Chicago wasn't part of the schedule. But he didn't get in the car. Instead, Vincent turned and walked toward the alley. His shoes cracked through ice that had formed over old puddles. The wind bit at his face, turning his breath into frozen clouds. As he got closer, the streetlight's faint orange glow revealed more details. A hand, pale and small, fingers curled inward, dark hair matted with snow. A face turned toward the brick wall. A woman. Young. Still trembling. Vincent crouched down beside her, his coat spreading across the icy pavement. He'd seen death enough times to recognize it, and this wasn't it. Not yet. Her chest moved in shallow, irregular gasps. Her lips had turned a disturbing shade of blue-gray. Hypothermia. Advanced stage. Maybe 10 minutes from irreversible. "Hey," Vincent said, his voice cutting through the wind. "Can you hear me?" No response, just that terrible, shallow breathing. He reached out and touched her shoulder. Her jacket was soaked through, frozen solid in places. Underneath, he could feel her body shaking violently, the kind of shivering that meant the core temperature had already dropped to dangerous levels. Her skin felt like ice through the wet fabric. Vincent pulled his phone from his coat and hit Marco's number. The driver answered before the first ring finished. "Boss? Get the car over here, now, and call Dr. Reeves. Tell him I'm bringing someone in cold. Real cold. He's got maybe 15 minutes to prep." "Got it." Vincent ended the call and shoved the phone back in his pocket. He looked down at the woman again, this time really seeing her. She couldn't have been more than 25. White, with delicate features that would have been pretty under different circumstances. Right now she just looked like she was dying. Her eyelids fluttered but didn't open. Consciousness was slipping away from her fast. He should have called 911. Let the paramedics handle it. That would have been the smart move. The safe move. Vincent DeLuca didn't get involved in random street emergencies. He didn't play hero. He ran a criminal empire built on calculated risks and cold decisions, and picking up a dying stranger in an alley was neither calculated nor cold. But something stopped him from making that call. Maybe it was the way her hand was still clutching a small backpack, like even unconscious she was trying to protect the few things she owned. Maybe it was how young she looked, how wrong it felt to see someone that age freezing to death in an alley while the rest of the city pretended not to notice. Or maybe it was something deeper, something Vincent had buried years ago and refused to think about. A memory of another woman, another winter, another failure. He didn't let himself finish that thought. Instead, Vincent slid his arms under the woman's body and lifted her. She weighed almost nothing. He could feel every bone through the wet jacket, could feel how severely malnourished she was beneath the cold. Her head rolled against his chest, dark hair spilling across his coat. The trembling continued, her body fighting a war it was losing. The Escalade pulled up beside him, and Marco jumped out to open the rear door. The driver's eyes went wide when he saw what Vincent was carrying, but he knew better than to ask questions. Vincent climbed into the back seat, still holding the woman against his chest. Her frozen clothes soaked into his expensive suit, but he didn't care. "Drive," Vincent ordered. "Fast, but don't hit anything. I need her alive when we get there." Marco nodded and slammed the door shut. The Escalade's tires spun briefly on the ice before finding traction, and then they were moving, cutting through the empty streets toward the private clinic Vincent operated 3 blocks away. The clinic that didn't exist on any official records. The clinic where people came when hospitals asked too many questions. Vincent looked down at the woman in his arms. Her breathing had gotten worse, more labored. Her lips looked even bluer under the SUV's interior lights. He pressed 2 fingers against her neck, feeling for a pulse. It was there, but weak, thready, inconsistent. "Come on," he muttered. "Don't you dare die in my car." She didn't respond. Didn't even seem to register his voice. Her eyes stayed closed, her body limp except for those terrible shivers that racked through her every few seconds. The clinic appeared ahead, a narrow 4-story building wedged between a closed laundromat and a shuttered bodega. The windows were dark except for the 3rd floor, where Dr. Reeves kept his operating suite. Marco pulled into the alley behind the building and killed the engine. Before Vincent could move, the back door of the clinic burst open and Dr. Reeves appeared with 2 nurses, all 3 of them moving fast. Reeves was 60, gray-haired, and steady-handed even after 4 decades of practicing medicine in Chicago's darkest corners. He'd lost his license 10 years ago for operating while intoxicated, but Vincent had given him a second chance. Now Reeves ran the best underground medical operation in the city, and he never drank before a surgery, ever. "Hypothermia?" Reeves asked, already assessing the woman as Vincent climbed out of the SUV. "Severe, found her maybe 8 minutes ago. She's crashing. Bring her inside, fast." They moved through the clinic's back entrance into a hallway that smelled like disinfectant and stress. The nurses had already prepped a gurney. Vincent laid the woman down as gently as he could, then stepped back as Reeves and his team swarmed her. Scissors cut through the frozen jacket. Warm blankets appeared. An IV line went into her arm on the 2nd attempt. A heart monitor started beeping, the rhythm erratic and weak. "Core temp is 89 degrees, one of the nurses announced, her voice tight. "Pulse is 42. Respiration shallow." "Get her on oxygen," Reeves ordered, "and start the warming protocol, slow and steady. If we heat her too fast, her heart's going to stop." Vincent stood in the hallway and watched them work. He should have left. Should have gone back to the Escalade and let Marco drive him to the meeting he was already late for. This woman wasn't his responsibility. He'd done his part by bringing her in. Whatever happened next was out of his hands. But he didn't leave. Instead, he leaned against the wall and watched as Reeves fought to pull her back from the edge. The doctor's hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking vitals, adjusting equipment, barking orders to the nurses who responded without hesitation. This was what Vincent paid for. Competence without questions, skill without judgment. "Who is she?" Reeves asked without looking up from his work. "No idea." "You just found her?" "In an alley off Halstead. She was almost gone." Reeves nodded slowly, still focused on the monitors. "Well, she's still almost gone. Next 20 minutes are critical. If her core temp doesn't stabilize, we're going to lose her." Vincent's jaw tightened. He pulled out his phone and texted his accountant that the meeting was postponed. Then he texted his operations manager that he'd be unavailable for the next few hours. Then he shoved the phone back in his pocket and kept watching. The woman's face had started to regain some color as the warming blankets did their work. Her features became clearer. High cheekbones, a small nose, full lips that weren't quite so blue anymore. Pretty, Vincent thought again. Maybe beautiful, under different circumstances. But beauty didn't mean much when you were dying in a Chicago alley at 20-something years old. "We've got a rhythm stabilizing," one of the nurses said. "Pulse is up to 56. "Good," Reeves replied. "Keep the warming gradual. I want her temp up 1 degree every 15 minutes, no faster." The team worked in synchronized silence after that, adjusting equipment, monitoring readings, making small corrections. Vincent had seen Reeves save dozens of lives in this clinic, had watched him perform surgeries that would have made hospital administrators faint. But he'd never seen the old doctor look this tense. This woman was close, real close. 30 minutes passed, then 45. The monitors gradually showed improvement, heart rate climbing, breathing getting stronger, core temperature inching upward, degree by painful degree. Reeves finally stepped back from the gurney and pulled off his latex gloves with a sharp snap. "She's stable," he announced. "For now, but she's not out of danger yet. Hypothermia this severe can cause complications for days. Kidney failure, heart arrhythmia, brain damage. We won't know the full extent until she wakes up." "When will that be?" Vincent asked. Reeves shrugged. "Could be hours. Could be longer. Her body's been through hell. It needs time to recover." He paused, studying Vincent with tired eyes. "You planning to stick around?" Vincent looked at the woman on the gurney. Her eyes were still closed, her breathing still shallow, but regular now. The heart monitor beeped steadily, a sound that meant life instead of death. She had no identification on her, no wallet, no phone, just that small backpack she'd been clutching, which the nurses had set aside on a chair. "Yeah," Vincent said quietly, "I'm staying." Reeves raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. He'd worked for Vincent long enough to know when not to push. "We'll move her to a recovery room. You can wait there if you want. But Vincent, you should probably figure out who she is, because when she wakes up, she's going to have questions. And knowing you, you're not going to like the answers you have to give." Vincent didn't respond to that. He just followed as the nurses wheeled the gurney down the hall toward the private recovery wing, the section of the clinic reserved for Vincent's most sensitive cases. The room they chose was small but clean, with a single window overlooking the alley. Medical equipment lined one wall. A chair sat in the corner. The woman was transferred from the gurney to the bed with practiced efficiency, then connected to fresh monitors. The nurses left. Reeves gave a few final instructions, then left too, and Vincent was alone with her. He sat in the chair and stared at this stranger he'd saved without knowing why. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering Chicago in white silence. Inside, the monitor beeped its steady rhythm, counting seconds that turned into minutes that turned into an hour. Vincent pulled out his phone and opened the background check app his security team used. He took a photo of the woman's face and uploaded it to the facial recognition system. 3 minutes later, results started appearing. Evelyn Marie Hart, age 24, born in Springfield, Illinois, parents deceased, killed in a car accident 6 years ago, currently enrolled at Chicago Community College, part-time student. Last known address, a studio apartment in Pilsen, rent 3 months overdue, credit score in the basement, student loan debt approaching 6 figures, No criminal record, no social media presence worth mentioning. A nobody, by most standards. Just another broke college kid trying to survive in a city that chewed people up and spit them out daily. But Vincent kept reading. Employment history showed 3 part-time jobs in the last year alone. Waitress, grocery store clerk, dog walker. All of them minimum wage. All of them barely enough to cover rent, let alone food or heat, or the medication she apparently needed based on the prescription records his system pulled from a hacked pharmacy database. Antidepressants. Recent. Prescribed after a psychiatric evaluation following what the notes carefully described as an episode of acute stress. Vincent closed the app and looked at Evelyn Hart sleeping in the hospital bed. The warming blankets had brought color back to her skin. Her breathing had normalized. She looked peaceful now, almost fragile. A girl who'd been dealt a shit hand and was doing everything she could just to stay alive. And she'd almost failed tonight. Vincent leaned back in the chair and rubbed his eyes. He should have left her in that alley, should have called 911 and walked away. Getting involved in her life was a mistake. She'd wake up eventually, and when she did, she'd ask questions. Who saved her? Why? What it cost? And Vincent would have to explain that she now owed her life to a man who ran half of Chicago's criminal underground. That conversation was going to be a nightmare. But as much as Vincent's logical mind told him to walk away, something else kept him in that chair. Something he didn't want to examine too closely. Something that felt uncomfortably like the ghost of a memory he'd spent years trying to bury. Hours passed. The snow outside turned to freezing rain that tapped against the window like impatient fingers. Vincent's phone buzzed with messages he ignored. His empire could run itself for one night. His meetings could wait. Right now, sitting in this quiet room watching a stranger breathe felt strangely more important than anything else. It was almost 4 in the morning when Evelyn's eyes finally opened. She didn't move at first, just stared at the ceiling, her expression confused and disoriented. Then her gaze slowly tracked across the room. The medical equipment, the monitors, the IV in her arm. Finally, her eyes found Vincent sitting in the corner, watching her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Evelyn's voice, rough and quiet from disuse, broke the silence. Am I dead? Vincent almost smiled. Almost. No, you're alive. Where am I? A clinic. Private. You were hypothermic when I found you. Severe stage. You almost didn't make it. Evelyn's eyes drifted back to the ceiling. She processed that information slowly, like her brain was still fighting through fog. You found me? In an alley off Halstead. You were unconscious. Freezing. I don't remember. Her voice sounded hollow, empty. I was walking home from work. It was so cold. I thought I could make it. I thought... She trailed off, her eyes closing again. I don't remember anything after that. Vincent leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You collapsed. If I hadn't been walking past, you would have died there. Evelyn's eyes opened again, and this time they focused on him with more clarity. She studied his face, the sharp jawline, the gray eyes that had seen too much, the expensive suit that didn't belong in a place like this. Understanding slowly dawned in her expression. Who are you? She asked. Vincent hesitated. This was the moment, the choice. He could lie, give her a fake name, a simple story, let her walk away thinking some good Samaritan had saved her life. That would be cleaner, safer for both of them. But Vincent DeLuca had built his reputation on a lot of things, and lying to people's faces wasn't one of them. Vincent DeLuca, he said. The name hung in the air between them. Vincent watched Evelyn's face for recognition, waiting to see if she knew who he was. Most people in Chicago did, at least by reputation. The Mafia Boss who controlled the South Side. The man politicians whispered about in closed rooms. The ghost who moved shipments through the port without ever appearing on a single surveillance camera. But Evelyn's expression showed only confusion. Should I know that name? She asked. Vincent felt something strange twist in his chest. Relief, maybe. Or disappointment. He wasn't sure which. No, he said quietly. You shouldn't. Evelyn's hand moved to the IV in her arm, her fingers tracing the tube absently. This treatment, she said slowly. The clinic. The doctor. How much is this going to cost me? And there it was. The question Vincent had been dreading. He could have lied again. Could have told her it was covered, that she didn't owe anything, that she should just recover and forget this ever happened. But Vincent had never given anything away for free in his life, and starting now would raise questions he didn't want to answer. $32,000, Vincent said flatly. Give or take. Depends on how long you need to stay here. The color that had finally returned to Evelyn's face drained away again. Her hand fell from the IV tube. Her eyes went wide with the kind of panic that came from knowing you were drowning and the shore just got farther away. 32. She couldn't finish the sentence. I don't have that. I don't have anything close to that. I can barely pay rent. I'm 3 months behind on student loans. Her breathing started to quicken, panic setting in. Calm down, Vincent said, his voice sharp enough to cut through her spiral. You're not dying anymore. Don't start hyperventilating and undo all the work we did keeping you alive. Evelyn forced herself to breathe slower, but her eyes were still wide, desperate. I can't pay you. I have maybe $800 to my name. That's it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't ask you to save me. I didn't ask for any of this. I know you didn't. Then why did you do it? Her voice cracked. Why didn't you just call an ambulance? Why didn't you leave me there? Vincent didn't have a good answer for that, so he said nothing. Evelyn stared at him for a long moment, then looked away. Tears started forming in her eyes, but she blinked them back with visible effort. I can't pay you, she repeated quietly. I don't know what you want me to say. I can't give you money I don't have. Vincent stood up from the chair and walked to the window. Outside, the freezing rain had stopped. Dawn was starting to break over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of gray and pale orange. He'd been awake for almost 24 hours straight. He should have been exhausted, should have been thinking about sleep. Instead, he was thinking about this girl who'd nearly died in an alley and now owed him more money than she'd probably see in 5 years of minimum wage jobs. You can work it off, Vincent said without turning around. Silence behind him. Then, what? Work. I've got operations that need staff, cleaning, filing, basic administrative work. You work, I deduct from what you owe. Simple. You're serious. I don't make jokes. Vincent turned back to face her. It's not charity. You'll work hard, long hours. The pay won't be great, but it'll clear your debt eventually. Evelyn stared at him like he'd just offered her a deal with the devil, which, Vincent supposed, wasn't far from the truth. What kind of operations? She asked carefully. Medical clinics? Legitimate ones, mostly. Some of my facilities operate in gray areas, but nothing that'll get you arrested. You'll be doing clerical work, helping patients, normal hospital stuff. Why would you do this? Because leaving you in debt you can't pay benefits nobody, Vincent said. And because I don't make a habit of letting my investments fail. I pulled you out of that alley. I paid for your treatment. Now I need to recoup that cost. This is how we do it. It wasn't the whole truth. Vincent didn't know what the whole truth was, but it was close enough. Evelyn's hands twisted the hospital blanket between her fingers. She looked small in that bed, vulnerable and lost, but her eyes showed something else, a spark of determination that hadn't died despite everything she'd been through. How long would it take? She asked. To work off $32,000. Depends on how fast you work, how many hours you put in. Maybe a year. Maybe less. And if I say no, Vincent's expression didn't change. Then you walk out of here owing me $32,000 plus interest, and we both know you'll never pay it back. Eventually I'll have to collect, and I'm not as gentle as I've been tonight. It wasn't a threat, just a statement of fact. Vincent DeLuca didn't make empty threats. Evelyn's jaw tightened. She looked at the IV in her arm, then at the monitors tracking her heartbeat, then finally back at Vincent standing by the window with the dawn breaking behind him. 1 year, she said quietly. Approximately. And then we're even. The debt's cleared. I never hear from you again. That's the deal. Evelyn took a deep breath, held it, then released it slowly. Okay, she said. I'll do it. Vincent nodded once. Good. You'll start as soon as Dr. Reeves clears you for discharge. Probably 2 or 3 days. Until then, you stay here and recover. Try not to die on me after I went through all this trouble. He turned toward the door, ready to leave and finally get some sleep, but Evelyn's voice stopped him. Mr. DeLuca? Vincent paused, his hand on the door handle. What? Thank you for saving my life, even if I'm going to spend the next year paying for it. Vincent looked back at her. Evelyn Hart, the girl who'd almost frozen to death in an alley, now stared at him with gratitude and fear and something else he couldn't quite identify. She should have hated him for trapping her in this deal, should have been furious, but instead she looked almost relieved. Don't thank me yet, Vincent said. You haven't seen what you're getting into. Then he left the room and closed the door behind him. In the hallway, Dr. Reeves was waiting with a clipboard and a knowing expression. So, the doctor said, we keeping her? Vincent pulled out his phone and started responding to the messages he'd ignored all night. She's working off her debt. Set her up with whatever she needs, food, clothes, a place to sleep until she's discharged. Bill it to the clinic's operating budget. Vincent! Reeves's voice carried a warning. You sure about this? Bringing in some random girl we know nothing about? That's not like you. I'm sure. Because from where I'm standing, this looks like you just made a decision based on something other than cold logic. And that's dangerous. Vincent stopped typing and looked up at the doctor with eyes that had made grown men back down from confrontations. She works. She pays her debt. Then she's gone. That's logic. Now do what I told you and get her set up. Reeves held his gaze for a moment, then sighed and nodded. Whatever you say, boss. Vincent finished responding to his messages, then walked out of the clinic into the freezing Chicago morning. Marco was still waiting with the Escalade, the driver looking exhausted but alert. Vincent climbed into the back seat and pulled out his phone to check his schedule. He had meetings stacked for the entire day, shipments to authorize, territory disputes to resolve, politicians to pay off, an empire to run with the same cold precision that had kept him alive and powerful for 15 years. But as Marco pulled away from the clinic and drove toward Vincent's penthouse downtown, all Vincent could think about was Evelyn Hart's face when she'd agreed to work off her debt. The way she'd looked at him with gratitude despite knowing exactly what kind of man had saved her life. Vincent leaned back against the leather seat and closed his eyes. He'd made a mistake tonight. He knew it. Saving that girl had been pure impulse, and Vincent DeLuca didn't do impulse. He did calculation, control, strategy. But something about finding her in that alley had cracked open a door inside him that he'd welded shut years ago, a door he'd promised himself would never open again. And now Evelyn Hart was going to be working in his operation for the next year, walking through his clinics, existing in his world, reminding him every single day of the decision he'd made in that frozen alley. Vincent opened his eyes and stared out the window at Chicago passing by in the early morning light. The city looked clean under fresh snow, almost innocent. But Vincent knew better. Chicago was a beast that devoured the weak and rewarded the ruthless. It had no mercy, no conscience. And Vincent DeLuca had survived in this city by becoming just as merciless. But tonight, for reasons he still didn't fully understand, he'd shown mercy to a dying girl in an alley. And that single moment of weakness was about to change everything. 3 days later, Evelyn walked out of the clinic, wearing clothes that didn't belong to her, and stepped into a life she didn't recognize. The pants were black and stiff, some kind of medical scrub material that smelled like industrial detergent. The shirt was white, buttoned down, 2 sizes too big. Someone had left them folded on the chair beside her bed, with a note written in sharp handwriting, "Wear these, be ready by 8." No signature. Evelyn knew who'd written it anyway. Dr. Reeves had cleared her that morning after running a final set of tests. Her core temperature had stabilized. Her heart rhythm looked normal. The kidney function that had worried him for 48 hours had bounced back. Physically, she'd survived. But Reeves had looked at her with tired eyes and said something that stuck in her mind like a splinter. "You got lucky this time. Next time you might not." Evelyn hadn't asked what he meant by next time. She just nodded and got dressed. Now she stood outside the clinic in the freezing morning air, watching her breath turn to fog, waiting for whatever came next. The street was empty except for a few cars passing by and a homeless man digging through a dumpster across the alley. Chicago looked exactly the same as it had before she almost died. The city didn't care. It just kept moving. A black Escalade turned the corner and pulled up to the curb. The rear window rolled down, and Vincent DeLuca's face appeared in the gap. "Get in." Evelyn hesitated for half a second, then opened the door and climbed inside. The interior smelled like leather and expensive cologne. Vincent sat on the far side, dressed in another perfectly tailored suit, his gray eyes fixed on his phone. He didn't look at her as the driver pulled away from the curb. They drove in silence for 10 minutes. Evelyn watched the south side blur past the tinted windows, shuttered storefronts, corner bodegas with barred windows, apartment buildings that looked like they'd given up decades ago. This was her neighborhood. She'd lived here for 2 years, worked 3 jobs trying to survive here, and nearly died here. But sitting in this SUV next to Vincent DeLuca made it all look different, smaller, like she was seeing it from the other side of a wall she hadn't known existed. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. "Mercy General," Vincent said without looking up from his phone. "The legitimate part. You'll be working intake on the 5th floor, checking patients in, handling paperwork, answering phones, basic administrative work." "That's it?" "That's it." He glanced at her briefly. "Were you expecting something more dramatic?" Evelyn didn't answer. Honestly, she hadn't known what to expect. When Vincent had offered her this deal, part of her brain had immediately jumped to every crime movie she'd ever seen. Drug operations, money laundering, bodies in barrels. But so far, everything looked almost normal. Almost. "The clinic I was in," Evelyn said carefully, "the one where you brought me. That's not part of the legitimate hospital, is it?" Vincent's expression didn't change. "No." "What is it?" "Somewhere people go when they can't go anywhere else." He put his phone away and finally turned to look at her directly. "You're going to hear things while you work here. You're going to see things that don't make sense. Patients with no insurance who somehow get treated anyway. Bills that disappear. People who shouldn't be walking around after the injuries they came in with. Here's the rule. You don't ask questions. You don't talk about what you see. You do your job, collect your paycheck, and go home. Understand?" Evelyn held his gaze. "And if I do ask questions, then you'll find out exactly how much trouble your curiosity is worth." Vincent's voice stayed level, but something cold moved behind his eyes. "I saved your life, Evelyn. Don't make me regret it." The threat hung in the air between them. Evelyn wanted to look away, to back down, to nod and agree like she was supposed to, but something stubborn inside her refused to break eye contact first. Finally, Vincent's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, more like recognition. "You've got spine," he said. "That's good. You'll need it working here." The Escalade pulled into the hospital's employee entrance. Vincent opened the door and stepped out, adjusting his coat against the wind. Evelyn followed him through a side door that required a key card, down a hallway that smelled like bleach and old coffee, and into an elevator that took them to the 5th floor. The floor looked like any other hospital wing. Nurses moved between rooms. Patients sat in waiting areas. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, but Evelyn noticed details that felt wrong. The security cameras were newer than the rest of the equipment. The staff moved with a kind of careful awareness, like they were always conscious of who was watching. And when Vincent walked past, everyone either nodded respectfully or found somewhere else to look. He led her to a desk near the intake station, where a woman in her 50s sat typing furiously on an ancient computer. The woman looked up when they approached, and her expression immediately shifted from irritation to careful neutrality. "Mr. DeLuca." "Angela, this is Evelyn Hart. She's starting today. Show her how intake works and get her set up with credentials." Angela's eyes flicked to Evelyn, scanning her with the kind of assessment that took in everything in 2 seconds. The oversized clothes. The exhaustion still visible in Evelyn's face. The way she stood just slightly behind Vincent like she was trying to disappear. "Sure thing," Angela said flatly. "Another trainee. Great." Vincent ignored the tone. "She works here until I say otherwise. Any problems? You report them to me. Not to HR, not to administration. To me." Angela nodded slowly. "Understood." Vincent turned to leave, then paused and looked back at Evelyn. "You start now. 8-hour shifts, 5 days a week. Paycheck comes every 2 weeks. Your debt gets deducted automatically. Questions?" Evelyn had about 1,000 questions, but she just shook her head. "Good." Vincent walked away without another word, disappearing into the elevator. The doors closed, and Evelyn was alone with Angela. The older woman stared at her for a long moment. Then she sighed and gestured to a chair beside the desk. "Sit down. We've got a lot to cover, and I don't have time to repeat myself." Evelyn sat. The next 6 hours blurred together in a chaos of instructions, passwords, procedures, and forms. Angela moved through everything at a relentless pace, barely pausing for breath. Patient intake protocols, insurance verification, billing codes, emergency contacts, how to handle walk-ins versus scheduled appointments, how to route calls, how to fill out admission paperwork without making mistakes that could get the hospital fined. It was overwhelming and monotonous at the same time. Evelyn's head spun trying to keep up. She took notes on scrap paper until her hand cramped. Angela corrected her constantly, sharply, without sympathy, every time she got something wrong. Pay attention. I'm not your mother. I won't hold your hand through this. That's the wrong form. Medicaid patients use the blue one, not the white one. Don't ask me that again. I just explained it 5 minutes ago. By lunchtime, Evelyn wanted to crawl under the desk and disappear, but Angela handed her a clipboard with actual patient files and pointed toward the waiting area. Start calling them back for intake. Names are on the list. Don't screw it up. Evelyn took the clipboard and walked toward the waiting room on shaking legs. The room was packed. Mothers holding crying babies, elderly men coughing into handkerchiefs, teenagers with blank expressions and bandaged hands. Everyone looked tired. Everyone looked like they'd been waiting too long. She called the first name on the list. A woman in her 30s stood up, holding a toddler against her hip. Evelyn led them back to an intake room, asked the standard questions Angela had drilled into her head, and filled out the forms with hands that trembled slightly from exhaustion and nerves. The woman watched her the entire time with suspicious eyes. You knew? She asked. First day, Evelyn admitted. Figures. The woman shifted the toddler to her other hip. How long you think we're going to be waiting? I don't know. I'm sorry. Everyone's always sorry here. But we still wait. The woman's voice carried years of frustration. My kid's been running a fever for 3 days. I called yesterday. They told me to come in this morning. Now it's afternoon and we're still sitting here. Evelyn didn't know what to say to that. She just finished the paperwork and led them back to the waiting area, promising someone would call them soon. The woman sat down heavily, looking defeated. Evelyn called the next name. Then the next. Then the next. Each patient brought their own story of pain, frustration, and desperation. She heard about injuries that wouldn't heal, bills that couldn't be paid, insurance that wouldn't cover necessary treatments. She saw the way people looked at this hospital, like it was a last resort, a place you only went when everywhere else had turned you away. By the time her shift ended, Evelyn's feet ached and her head pounded. She'd processed 23 patients. She'd made mistakes on at least half of them. Angela had corrected her every time with increasingly sharp comments that made Evelyn feel stupid and incompetent. But she'd survived the day. Angela looked at her as she gathered her things to leave. You coming back tomorrow? Evelyn nodded. We'll see. Angela turned back to her computer. Most people don't make it past the first week. Evelyn wanted to ask why. Instead, she just left. The Escalade was waiting outside. Marco, the driver, opened the door without a word. Evelyn climbed in, expecting to ride alone. But Vincent was there again, sitting in the same position as this morning, phone in hand. How was it? He asked. Hard. It gets harder. They drove in silence again. Evelyn leaned her head against the window and watched Chicago pass by. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It would have been beautiful if she'd had the energy to care. Where do you live? Vincent asked suddenly. Evelyn gave him her address in Pilsen. Vincent relayed it to Marco, who changed direction without comment. 20 minutes later, they pulled up outside Evelyn's apartment building, a crumbling 3-story walk-up wedged between a liquor store and a laundromat. Vincent looked at the building through the window, his expression unreadable. This is it? Yeah. What floor? 3rd. Vincent's jaw tightened. Any heat? Sometimes. Evelyn opened the door. Thanks for the ride. Wait. Vincent pulled an envelope from his coat pocket and handed it to her. First week's advance, cash. Use it for whatever you need. Evelyn looked at the envelope without taking it. I thought the debt gets deducted automatically. It does. This is separate. Why? Because I need you functional. Can't have you collapsing from malnutrition or hypothermia again. Bad for productivity. Vincent's tone was flat, businesslike. Take it. Evelyn took the envelope. It felt thick, heavy. She didn't open it. "Thank you," she said quietly. Vincent nodded once. Then the Escalade pulled away, leaving Evelyn standing on the sidewalk in the freezing evening air. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The studio was exactly as she'd left it. Tiny, cold, messy. Clothes piled on the floor, dishes stacked in the sink, a mattress on the ground with blankets she hadn't washed in weeks. The radiator clanked uselessly in the corner, providing no heat. Evelyn sat on the mattress and opened the envelope. $500, all cash. More money than she'd had at once in months. She stared at it for a long time. Then she put her head in her hands and cried for the first time since waking up in Vincent's clinic. The days blurred together after that. Evelyn worked her shifts at the hospital, processing patients, answering phones, filling out endless paperwork under Angela's harsh supervision. She learned the rhythms of the floor, which doctors were kind and which ones yelled, which nurses could be trusted and which ones gossiped, which patients were regulars and which ones were new. She also learned which patients didn't exist in any official system. They came in through the side entrance, usually late at night. Young men with gunshot wounds, women with injuries that looked like someone had beaten them, kids with broken bones and terrified eyes. They all had one thing in common. They couldn't go to a normal emergency room, too many questions, too much documentation. But here, on Vincent's floors, they got treated anyway. Evelyn processed them like everyone else, but she noticed the differences. Their intake forms were incomplete. Their billing codes were always marked administrative review, and they always left without anyone ever mentioning insurance or payment. She didn't ask questions. She remembered Vincent's warning, but she wasn't blind. 2 weeks into the job, Evelyn was filing paperwork in the back office when she overheard 2 nurses talking in the break room next door. The door was cracked open, and their voices carried through clearly. "Did you see the kid they brought in last night? Couldn't have been more than 14. Bullet went clean through his shoulder." "DeLuca's operation?" "Has to be. No police report, no parents. Just patched him up and sent him back out." "I don't ask anymore. Safer that way." "Yeah, but doesn't it bother you? We're basically running a criminal hospital here. We're running the only hospital that'll treat people the system gave up on. Call it whatever you want." Evelyn stood frozen in the filing room, her hand still on the cabinet drawer. She'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed was different. This wasn't just a hospital with loose billing practices. This was Vincent's operation, his network, and she was part of it now. The realization should have terrified her, should have made her want to quit, to walk away, to find some other way to pay off her debt. But instead, Evelyn thought about the patients she'd seen. The mother with the sick toddler who couldn't afford a regular hospital. The elderly man with no insurance who needed medication he'd never be able to buy. The teenage girl who came in with bruises she wouldn't explain and left with treatment she'd never have received anywhere else. These people had nowhere else to go. And Vincent DeLuca, the Mafia Boss, who supposedly had no conscience, was the only one helping them. Evelyn closed the filing cabinet and went back to work. A month passed, then 2. Winter deepened into the kind of cold that made Chicago feel like an Arctic prison. Evelyn fell into a routine. Wake up at 6, take 2 buses to the hospital, work 8 hours under Angela's relentless criticism, take 2 buses home, eat whatever cheap food she could afford, sleep, repeat. The debt decreased slowly. Each paycheck showed the deduction. Each week the number got slightly smaller. At this rate, she'd be free in about 11 months. She almost never saw Vincent. He came to the hospital occasionally, always surrounded by men in expensive suits, always moving with purpose. When he passed by the intake desk, he never acknowledged her. Evelyn told herself that was fine. Better, even. The less interaction, the simpler everything stayed. But she noticed things anyway. The way Vincent's jaw tightened when he saw elderly patients struggling in the waiting room. The way he stopped to talk to a young mother whose son was being treated for asthma, his voice quiet and almost gentle. The way his eyes swept across the floor constantly, cataloging everything, missing nothing. He wasn't just running a criminal operation. He was protecting something. One afternoon in late February, Evelyn was processing a walk-in patient when Angela suddenly grabbed her arm. "Come with me. Now." Evelyn followed Angela down the hallway to a private exam room. Inside, a woman sat on the examination table, holding her side. Blood seeped through her fingers, Her face was pale, her breathing shallow. "Gunshot wound," Angela said flatly. "Through and through. She won't go to the ER. Process her intake. Fast." Evelyn stared at the blood. "Shouldn't we call?" "No police, no questions, just do the intake." Angela shoved a clipboard at her and left. The woman looked at Evelyn with desperate eyes. "Please, I can't let anyone know I was here." Evelyn's hands shook as she filled out the form. Name, age, symptoms. She skipped the insurance section entirely and marked it administrative review like she'd seen on the other special cases. A doctor arrived minutes later. Not Reeves, but another man Evelyn had seen around the floor. He examined the woman quickly, applied pressure to stop the bleeding, and called for a nurse to assist with stitches. "You did good," he told Evelyn. "Now forget you saw her." Evelyn nodded and left the room. But her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She'd just processed someone with a gunshot wound and hadn't reported it. That was illegal. That made her complicit. She made it to the bathroom before the panic attack hit. Evelyn locked herself in a stall and tried to breathe through the tightness, crushing her chest. This was wrong. All of it. She was supposed to be working off a debt, not becoming part of a criminal network. She was supposed to keep her head down and survive, not get dragged deeper into Vincent DeLuca's world. But what choice did she have? Walk away? Default on the debt? Face whatever collection Vincent had warned her about? The bathroom door opened. Footsteps approached. Then Angela's voice cut through Evelyn's spiral. "You in here?" Evelyn didn't answer. "I can see your shoes under the stall. Come out." Evelyn unlocked the door and stepped out. Angela stood by the sinks, arms crossed, expression hard. "First time seeing real blood?" Angela asked. Evelyn nodded. "Gets easier, or you quit. Those are your options." Angela's voice wasn't unkind, just factual. "This floor isn't like normal hospitals. We treat people who can't be treated anywhere else. Some of them are good people in bad situations. Some of them are bad people in worse situations. We don't judge. We just patch them up and send them out." "That's illegal," Evelyn said quietly. "So is letting people die because they can't afford treatment." Angela moved to the sink and washed her hands. "You want to know why I've worked here for 12 years? Because I used to work at Cook County. I watched insurance companies deny coverage to a 6-year-old with leukemia because it was a pre-existing condition. I watched that kid die, and I decided I'd rather work somewhere that saves people than somewhere that kills them with paperwork." Evelyn stared at her. "But Vincent DeLuca is the Mafia Boss who runs half of Chicago's underground?" "Yeah, he is." Angela dried her hands on a paper towel. "He's also the man who funds this entire operation, who makes sure we have equipment when the hospital budget cuts us, who pays for medications when patients can't. You think that woman with the gunshot wound could have afforded treatment anywhere else? She'd be dead in an alley by tomorrow." "That doesn't make it right." "No, it doesn't." Angela threw the paper towel in the trash. "But it makes it necessary. You'll figure that out eventually. Or you'll quit. Like I said, those are your options." She left Evelyn alone in the bathroom. Evelyn looked at herself in the mirror. She looked thinner than before, exhausted. Her eyes had dark circles that makeup couldn't cover. She barely recognized the person staring back. 2 months ago, she'd been a broke college student barely surviving. Now she was working for a criminal organization, processing gunshot victims, and becoming complicit in activities that could land her in prison. But she was also alive, and she was paying off her debt. Evelyn splashed cold water on her face and went back to work. That night, when Marco dropped her off at her apartment, Vincent was waiting in the Escalade's back seat again. "Get in," he said. Evelyn climbed inside. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. We need to talk." The SUV pulled away from the curb. They drove through Chicago in silence for several minutes. Finally, Vincent spoke. "Angela told me what happened today. The patient with the gunshot wound." Evelyn's stomach tightened. "I processed her intake like I was told." "I know. Angela says you handled it well." Vincent looked at her directly. "But she also says you had a panic attack in the bathroom afterward." Evelyn didn't respond. "You're struggling with this," Vincent continued, "with what we do here. I get it. But I need to know if you're going to be a problem." "I'm not a problem." "Then what are you?" Evelyn met his eyes. I'm someone trying to survive, just like everyone else who comes through that hospital. Vincent studied her for a long moment, then he nodded slowly. Fair enough. They drove in silence again. Evelyn watched the city lights blur past the window. She should have been terrified of this man, should have hated him for trapping her in this situation. But when she looked at Vincent, all she saw was exhaustion that matched her own. Why do you do it? She asked suddenly. Vincent's expression didn't change. Do what? Run the hospital floors, treat people who can't pay, risk your operation for strangers. It's good business, keeps people loyal. That's not why. Evelyn's voice was quiet but certain. I've seen you there. The way you look at the patients. That's not business. Vincent's jaw tightened. For a moment, Evelyn thought he'd tell her to mind her own business, to shut up and stop asking questions. Instead, he looked out the window and said something she didn't expect. I had a sister, younger than me. She got sick when she was 16, needed treatment our family couldn't afford. My father tried everything, begged doctors, applied for programs, sold everything we had. Wasn't enough. She died waiting for treatment that never came. Evelyn's breath caught. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was 20 years ago. Vincent's voice stayed level, but his hands curled into fists against his thighs. But I decided then that if I ever had the power to stop that from happening to someone else, I would. So that's what I do. I make sure people get treated regardless of whether they can pay. That's not what most mafia bosses do. I'm not most mafia bosses. Vincent finally looked back at her. And you're not most employees. Most people would have quit by now, or tried to report me, or demanded I let them out of the debt. But you're still here, still working, still showing up every day despite hating every minute of it. I don't hate it, Evelyn said before she could stop herself. Vincent raised an eyebrow. No? I hate the fear. I hate feeling like I'm breaking the law. I hate not knowing if what I'm doing is right or wrong. Evelyn took a breath. But I don't hate helping people, even if it's messy, even if it's complicated. Something shifted in Vincent's expression, not quite a smile, but close. You're tougher than you look, Evelyn Hart. The Escalade pulled up outside her apartment building. Evelyn reached for the door handle, then hesitated. Mr. DeLuca? Vincent. Just call me Vincent. Vincent? The name felt strange in her mouth, too familiar. Thank you for telling me about your sister. Vincent nodded once. Don't make me regret it. Evelyn climbed out of the SUV and watched it drive away. Then she went upstairs to her freezing apartment and lay on her mattress, staring at the ceiling. Something had changed tonight. Some wall between her and Vincent had cracked open just enough to let light through. She'd seen past the Mafia Boss facade to the man underneath. The man who'd lost his sister and spent 20 years trying to make up for it. That man was dangerous. Not because of his power or his violence, but because he made Evelyn want to understand him. And understanding him meant getting closer. And getting closer meant risking everything. 3 weeks later, everything fell apart. It started with a mistake. One of the intake nurses, a young guy named Marcus who'd only been working the floor for a month, accidentally filed a report on one of the special patients, a 17-year-old with a stab wound who'd come in through the side entrance. Marcus didn't know the protocol, didn't realize the patient was supposed to stay off the official records. By the time anyone noticed, the report had already been submitted to the state database. Angela caught it during an audit the next day. She called Vincent immediately. Evelyn was at the intake desk when Vincent arrived. He moved through the floor like a storm, his expression carved from ice, his eyes murderous. Staff members scattered. Nurses found urgent tasks in other hallways. Even the doctors made themselves scarce. Vincent grabbed Marcus by the arm and dragged him into an empty exam room. Evelyn heard the door slam shut. Then she heard Vincent's voice, low and deadly. You filed a report on the Jackson kid. I didn't know. You didn't know? You've been here a month. How do you not know the basic fucking protocols? Nobody told me. Angela told you. I know she did. Because she tells everyone. Vincent's voice got quieter, which somehow made it worse. Do you understand what you just did? That kid is 17. He's got priors. The police see this report. They're going to pick him up. They're going to question him. And eventually, they're going to trace him back here. To this hospital. To my operation. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't unfuck this situation. There was a long silence. Then Vincent's voice again, colder than before. You're done. Pack your shit and get out. If I ever see you in this building again, we're going to have a different kind of conversation." The door opened. Marcus stumbled out, his face pale, and practically ran toward the exit. Vincent stood in the doorway, his expression carved from granite. His eyes swept across the floor, landing on every staff member who'd been pretending not to listen. "Anyone else want to fuck up my operation today?" he asked quietly. Nobody responded. "Good. Get back to work." Vincent turned and left through the same elevator he'd arrived from. The floor stayed silent for a full minute after he was gone. Then, slowly, people started moving again, whispering, processing what had just happened. Evelyn's hands shook as she went back to her paperwork. She'd never seen Vincent like that. Angry, yes. Cold, yes. But that kind of controlled fury was something else entirely. That was the Mafia Boss everyone feared, the man who made problems disappear. That night, when Marco's Escalade dropped Evelyn off at her apartment, Vincent wasn't in the back seat. She felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. But the next morning, everything changed again. Evelyn arrived at the hospital to find police cars parked outside the main entrance. Her heart dropped into her stomach. This was it. Marcus's mistake had blown back. They were shutting down the operation. Everyone was going to get arrested. She almost turned around and ran. But then she saw Vincent standing near the entrance, talking calmly to two detectives. He looked completely relaxed, his expression pleasant, his body language open, like he had nothing to hide. The detectives nodded at whatever he was saying, then got back in their car and drove away. Vincent caught Evelyn's eye as she approached. He tilted his head slightly, a gesture that meant, "Follow me." They walked around the building to the side entrance. Once they were alone in the hallway, Vincent stopped and turned to face her. "The Jackson kids' report got flagged," he said flatly. "Police came asking questions." Evelyn's throat went dry. "What did you tell them?" "The truth. That we treated a minor with a stab wound and properly documented it according to state law. They wanted to know where the kid was now. I told them he was released to his mother, and I had no idea where he went after that." Vincent's expression stayed calm. "They bought it. For now." "For now? They're going to keep digging, going to start looking at other reports from this floor, going to notice patterns." Vincent's jaw tightened. Marcus's mistake might have just put a spotlight on everything we do here. Evelyn felt cold spreading through her chest. What happens if they find something? "Then we shut down the operation. Move patients to different facilities, scatter the staff, burn the records." Vincent looked at her directly. "And everyone who worked here becomes a liability." The threat was implicit, clear. Evelyn swallowed hard. "What do you need me to do?" "Nothing. Keep working. Act normal. If anyone asks you questions, cops, administrators, anyone, you don't know anything. You just process intake. You don't know where patients go after treatment. You don't know about billing. You don't know about the special protocols. Understand?" Evelyn nodded. Vincent studied her face for a moment. Then he did something unexpected. He reached out and put his hand on her shoulder. The touch was brief, almost gentle. "You're going to be fine," he said quietly. "I won't let anything happen to you." Then he walked away, leaving Evelyn standing alone in the hallway with her heart pounding against her ribs. That promise shouldn't have meant anything. Vincent DeLuca was a criminal, a mafia boss, a man who solved problems with violence and intimidation. But when he touched her shoulder and promised she'd be fine, Evelyn had believed him, and that was the most terrifying thing of all. Because somewhere in the last 2 months, she'd stopped seeing Vincent as the dangerous man who'd trapped her in debt, and started seeing him as the only person in this city who actually gave a damn whether she lived or died. The next week crawled by in tense silence. The police didn't come back. No more questions were asked. But the atmosphere on the 5th floor had changed. Staff members moved cautiously, speaking in whispers, watching each other with suspicious eyes. Evelyn kept her head down and did her work. But she felt Vincent's presence everywhere. He came to the floor more often now, checking on things personally instead of delegating. And every time he passed the intake desk, his eyes found hers for just a second. Not threatening, not warning, just acknowledging. On Friday afternoon, a delivery arrived at the intake desk. A coffee cup from the expensive place 3 blocks away. The kind Evelyn could never afford. Her name was written on the side in neat handwriting. Angela saw it and raised an eyebrow. "Looks like someone's got an admirer." Evelyn stared at the cup. No note, no explanation. But she knew who'd sent it. She drank the coffee slowly, tasting something that had nothing to do with caffeine. That night, Vincent was waiting in the Escalade again. Evelyn climbed in without being told. They drove through Chicago as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. "Thank you for the coffee," Evelyn said quietly. Vincent didn't look at her. "You look tired. Figured you could use it." "That's all?" "That's all." But it wasn't all. They both knew it. The Escalade stopped at a red light. In the silence, Evelyn became acutely aware of how close Vincent was sitting, how she could smell his cologne, how his hands rested against his thighs, relaxed but ready. "Evelyn." Her name sounded different in his voice, rougher, more real. She turned to look at him. "Yeah?" Vincent finally met her eyes. And in that moment, something passed between them that had nothing to do with debts or hospitals or criminal operations. "I think we're in trouble," he said softly. Evelyn's breath caught. "What kind of trouble?" Vincent didn't answer. He just held her gaze while the city lights reflected in his gray eyes and the world outside kept moving and everything between them shifted into something neither of them could take back. The light turned green. Marco drove forward, and Evelyn realized that Vincent was right. They were in trouble. The kind of trouble that didn't have an easy way out. The trouble started small. A text message at 2 a.m. Vincent's name on the screen. Evelyn stared at her phone in the darkness of her freezing apartment, her heart already racing before she even read the words. "Need you at the clinic, now. Emergency." She was dressed and out the door in 5 minutes. The streets were empty, the kind of dead silence that only happened in Chicago's deepest winter hours. Marco picked her up at the corner, his expression grim. He didn't say a word during the drive. The clinic's back entrance was open. Dr. Reeves stood in the hallway, his hands covered in blood, his face gray with exhaustion. "Where is he?" Evelyn asked. Reeves pointed toward the operating suite. "In there." But Evelyn, she didn't wait to hear the rest. She pushed through the doors and stopped dead. Vincent sat on the edge of an operating table, his shirt torn and soaked with blood. A deep gash ran across his ribs, the edges ragged like someone had come at him with a broken bottle. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, but his eyes were alert, furious. A nurse was trying to clean the wound. Vincent kept pushing her hands away. "I don't need stitches. I need you to find out who the fuck did this." "Mr. DeLuca, you're bleeding. I don't care." Evelyn stepped forward. "Vincent." His head snapped toward her. For a moment, his expression was pure violence. Then recognition hit, and something in his face softened, just barely. "What are you doing here?" he asked roughly. "You texted me." Evelyn moved closer, ignoring the blood. "Let them treat you. It's not that bad. You're bleeding through your shirt. It's that bad." Evelyn looked at the nurse. "What do you need?" The nurse glanced between them, uncertain. Vincent's jaw tightened, then he exhaled hard and lay back on the table. "Fine. Do it fast." The nurse worked quickly while Evelyn stood nearby, watching Vincent's face. He didn't flinch when she cleaned the wound, didn't react when she started stitching. His eyes stayed fixed on the ceiling, his hands curled into fists against the table. "What happened?" Evelyn asked quietly. Vincent didn't answer immediately. The nurse finished the stitches and wrapped gauze around his torso. Then she left, closing the door behind her. Only then did Vincent speak. "Salvatore happened." Evelyn's stomach dropped. She'd heard that name before. Whispered in hallways, mentioned in careful tones by staff who knew better than to say it too loud. Salvatore DeLuca, Vincent's father, the old patriarch who'd run Chicago's underworld for 40 years before handing control to his son. "Your father did this?" Evelyn's voice came out smaller than she intended. "Not directly. He sent his guys." Vincent sat up slowly, wincing. "Wanted to send a message." "What message?" Vincent looked at her for a long moment. Then he said something that made the world tilt sideways. "That I'm getting soft, that I'm making mistakes, that I'm distracted." His gray eyes held hers. "Because of you." The words hung in the air like smoke. Evelyn took a step back. "What?" "Salvatore's been watching. He knows about you, knows I pulled you out of that alley, knows you're working the hospital, knows I've been—" Vincent stopped, his jaw working. He knows I've been different since you showed up. Different how? Weaker. The word came out like poison. That's what he thinks. That I'm going soft because I give a shit about someone who isn't family. Someone who isn't useful to the operation. Someone who's just... He gestured at her, frustrated. You. Evelyn felt something crack open inside her chest. So this is my fault? You getting attacked is because I exist? No. This is Salvatore's fault for being a paranoid bastard who thinks caring about anything makes you weak. Vincent stood up, moving carefully around the fresh stitches. But he's not wrong about one thing. I have been distracted. And in this world, distraction gets you killed. Then fire me. Evelyn's voice shook. Send me away. Tell your father I'm gone. Problem solved. Vincent stared at her. You think it's that simple? Isn't it? No. He moved closer, and Evelyn could smell blood and antiseptic on him. Because firing you doesn't change the fact that I pulled you out of that alley. Doesn't change the fact that I gave you a job instead of collecting the debt. Doesn't change the fact that every time you walk past my desk, I notice. Every time you're late to work, I check to make sure you're okay. Every time someone looks at you wrong, I want to put them through a fucking wall. Evelyn's breath caught. Vincent? Salvatore sees all of that, sees me acting like someone who has something to lose. And in his world, having something to lose means you're vulnerable, means you can be controlled, means you're not fit to run the empire. Vincent's hands curled into fists, so he sent his guys to remind me what happens when I forget who I am. The operating room felt too small suddenly, too close. Evelyn could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. What are you saying? She whispered. Vincent looked at her with an expression that was equal parts fury and something terrifyingly close to desperation. I'm saying we're past the point where you can just disappear and make this go away. I'm saying my father now sees you as a weakness he needs to eliminate. I'm saying that keeping you safe just became a lot more complicated. Keeping me safe? Evelyn's voice rose. I didn't ask you to protect me. I didn't ask for any of this. You're the one who pulled me into your world. You're the one who made me work off a debt I never wanted. You're the one who... I know. Vincent's voice cut through her building panic. I know this is my fault. All of it. But it's too late to undo it now. Evelyn wanted to scream. Wanted to run. Wanted to go back to 2 months ago when she was just a broke college student freezing in an alley. At least then, the only person who could destroy her life was herself. What do we do? She asked finally. Vincent's expression hardened. You stay close to me. You don't go anywhere alone. You don't talk to anyone you don't know. And if anyone approaches you asking questions about me or my operation, you tell me immediately. That's it? I just become your prisoner? You become someone I can protect. Vincent stepped closer. Evelyn, I need you to understand something. My father doesn't make idle threats. If he's decided you're a problem, he will solve you, and I can't let that happen. Why not? The question came out raw, honest. Why do you even care? I'm nobody. I'm just some girl you saved because you felt guilty about your sister. Why does it matter if I live or die? Vincent's eyes darkened. He opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. For the first time since Evelyn had met him, the Mafia boss who always had control looked completely lost. I don't know, he said quietly, but it does. The admission hung between them like a lit fuse. Evelyn's phone buzzed. She pulled it from her pocket and saw Angela's name on the screen. The message was short and brutal. Police are at the hospital, looking for you specifically. Don't come in. Evelyn's hands went cold. She showed Vincent the message. His expression turned to ice. They're moving faster than I thought. What are you talking about? Salvatore. Vincent grabbed his phone and started typing. He didn't just send guys to beat me up. He made a call, tipped off the police about our operation, about you specifically. Why me? Because you're the easiest target. You're not family. You're not protected. And if they arrest you for being part of an illegal medical operation, you become leverage. Vincent's jaw tightened. He's trying to force my hand, make me choose between you and the Empire. Evelyn felt the room spinning. This can't be happening. It's happening. Vincent grabbed her arm, his grip firm. Listen to me. You can't go home. Can't go to the hospital. Can't use your credit cards or your phone after this conversation. You need to disappear right now. Disappear where? I've got a safe house in Lincoln Park. Nobody knows about it except Marco and Reeves. You'll stay there until I figure out how to fix this. Fix this? Evelyn pulled her arm free. Your father just weaponized the police against me. How exactly do you fix that? Vincent's expression was carved from stone. By doing what I should have done years ago, cutting Salvatore out of my operation completely. The words dropped like a bomb. Evelyn stared at him. You're going to go to war with your own father. I'm going to protect what's mine. Vincent's voice was absolute, final. And right now, that includes you. Before Evelyn could respond, the clinic's alarm system started blaring. Red lights flashed in the hallway outside. Dr. Reeves burst through the door, his face panicked. Police, front and back entrances. They've got warrants. Vincent moved instantly. He grabbed Evelyn's hand and pulled her toward a door she'd never noticed before. A maintenance exit hidden behind a supply cabinet. They ran through a narrow corridor that smelled like mold and rust, Vincent moving despite his fresh stitches, Evelyn stumbling to keep up. They emerged in an alley 3 buildings away. Marco was already there with the Escalade, engine running. Vincent shoved Evelyn into the back seat and climbed in after her. Drive. Now. Marco hit the gas. The SUV shot forward, tires screaming against ice. Behind them, police sirens wailed through the night. Evelyn pressed her face against the window, watching the clinic disappear behind them. Her entire body shook. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. 24 hours ago, her biggest problem was paying rent. Now she was running from the police with a mafia boss who'd just declared war on his own father because of her. I'm going to be sick, she whispered. Vincent pulled her away from the window and turned her to face him. His hands cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Breathe, he ordered. Deep breath, in and out. Don't fall apart on me now. Evelyn tried to breathe, failed, tried again. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. This is insane, she choked out. Your father is trying to destroy me because we... She couldn't finish the sentence. I know. Do you? Evelyn's voice cracked. Do you understand that my entire life just ended? I can't go home, can't go to school, can't see anyone I know. I'm officially a fugitive because you decided I was worth saving. Vincent's hands tightened against her face. You are worth saving. Says who? You? The man whose father just put a target on my back. Evelyn shoved his hands away. Maybe I would have been better off dying in that alley. At least then I'd be free. The words came out before she could stop them. Cruel, desperate, true. Vincent's expression shattered. Just for a second. Then it rebuilt itself into something harder. Don't say that, he said quietly. Don't ever fucking say that. Why not? It's true. You saved my life, and now it's not even mine anymore. It belongs to you, to your war with your father, to your empire. I'm just collateral damage in a fight I never asked to be part of. You're not collateral damage. Vincent's voice dropped to something raw, dangerous. You're the first thing I've given a damn about in 10 years. The first person who looked at me like I was human instead of a weapon. The first time I felt like something other than the monster my father made me. Evelyn's breath stopped in her chest. Vincent kept talking, words spilling out like a confession he couldn't contain anymore. I didn't save you because you reminded me of my sister. I saved you because when I saw you dying in that snow, something inside me broke. Because every day you show up to work, exhausted and scared but still trying, I feel less empty. Because when you smile at patients, I remember what kindness looks like. Because you make me want to be someone other than Vincent DeLuca, the mafia boss who controls half of Chicago through fear. He stopped, breathing hard, his eyes burning into hers. So no, he said, you're not collateral damage. You're the reason I'm finally willing to burn it all down. The Escalade went silent, except for the sound of tires on wet pavement and Evelyn's ragged breathing. She should have been terrified, should have told him he was insane, should have demanded Marco stop the car so she could run and never look back. But instead, Evelyn heard herself say the most dangerous thing she could possibly say. I don't want you to burn it down for me. I just want you to be honest about what this is. Vincent's eyes searched her face. What do you want it to be? I don't know. Evelyn's voice shook. But I know it's not just about a debt anymore. It hasn't been for weeks, maybe months. And pretending otherwise is just making everything worse. The SUV turned onto Lakeshore Drive. The city lights reflected off the frozen lake. turning the world into shades of gold and black. In the back seat, Vincent and Evelyn stared at each other while the truth neither of them wanted to acknowledge finally forced its way into the open. Vincent moved first. His hand came up slowly, carefully, like he was afraid she'd disappear. His fingers brushed against her cheek, still damp from tears she hadn't realized she'd shed. "If I'm honest," he said quietly, "I'll have to admit that I'm in love with you. And admitting that makes you a target, makes you vulnerable, puts you in more danger than you're already in." Evelyn's heart stopped, started again, pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. "And if I'm honest," she whispered, "I'll have to admit that I'm in love with you too, despite everything, despite knowing how insane this is, despite knowing it's probably going to destroy both of us." Vincent's thumb traced her jaw. His eyes held hers with an intensity that made the rest of the world disappear. "Then we're both fucked," he said. "Completely." He kissed her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't romantic. It was desperate and furious and tasted like blood from his split lip and salt from her tears. Evelyn's hands fisted in his shirt, feeling his heart hammering against her palms. Vincent's fingers tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, like he could somehow merge them into one person who couldn't be separated or destroyed. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Evelyn realized they'd crossed a line they could never uncross. "This doesn't fix anything," she said. "I know. Your father still wants me dead." "I know. The police are still looking for both of us." "I know." Vincent's forehead pressed against hers. "But at least now we're not lying about why we're fighting." The Escalade pulled up to a nondescript building in Lincoln Park. Marco killed the engine and got out without a word, scanning the street with professional paranoia. Vincent helped Evelyn out of the SUV and led her inside. The safe house was small. One bedroom, one bathroom, a kitchen that looked like it had never been used. But it was clean, secure, hidden. "Stay here," Vincent ordered. "Don't leave. Don't call anyone. Don't even look out the windows." "How long?" "Until I deal with Salvatore." Vincent's expression hardened. "One way or another." Evelyn grabbed his arm before he could leave. "Vincent, don't do anything stupid." "Stupid would be letting my father destroy the only good thing I've had in years." He kissed her forehead. "I'll be back. I promise." Then he was gone. Evelyn stood alone in the safe house, listening to the Escalade drive away. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Her mind kept replaying the last hour, the blood, the police, the confession, the kiss. She should have been planning her escape, should have been figuring out how to run, how to disappear, how to start over somewhere Vincent's world couldn't reach her. But instead, Evelyn found herself waiting, hoping, praying to something she didn't believe in that Vincent would survive whatever confrontation was coming. Because somewhere between the alley and the hospital and the back seat of that SUV, she'd stopped trying to escape Vincent DeLuca and started trying to save him. Hours passed. Dawn broke over Chicago, painting the frozen city in shades of gray and gold. Evelyn sat by the window despite Vincent's warning, watching the street below for the Escalade that didn't come. Her phone was dead. She turned it off like Vincent told her. So when the knock came at the door, she had no warning. Evelyn froze. The knock came again, firm, insistent. "Evelyn Hart, open the door." The voice was male, older, carried the kind of authority that came from decades of being obeyed without question. Not Vincent, not Marco, not anyone she knew. Evelyn's blood turned to ice. She backed away from the door, her mind racing. The safe house was supposed to be secret. Nobody was supposed to know she was here. The voice came again. "I know you're in there. I know my son brought you here, and I know you're scared, but I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to offer you a choice. Salvatore." Vincent's father had found her. The door handle rattled. Not forced, just tested. Then silence. "I'm going to leave my card under the door," Salvatore said. "When you're ready to talk, call me, because Vincent can't protect you forever. And when he fails, and he will fail, you'll need someone who can." A business card slid under the door, white, embossed, expensive. Then footsteps retreating down the hallway. A car starting outside, driving away. Evelyn stared at the card like it was a bomb. She knew she shouldn't touch it, shouldn't even acknowledge it existed. But her hands moved anyway. She picked it up. Salvatore DeLuca, chairman. DeLuca Enterprises. A phone number. Nothing else. Evelyn stood in the middle of the safe house that wasn't safe anymore, holding a card from the man who wanted her dead, waiting for the man she loved to come back from a war he might not survive. And for the first time since Vincent had pulled her from that alley, Evelyn understood the truth. She wasn't caught between two worlds anymore. She was the battleground where Vincent and Salvatore's war would be fought, and whatever happened next would destroy one of them completely, maybe both. Evelyn stared at Salvatore's business card for 3 hours before she made the call. Her hand shook as she dialed the number. The phone rang twice before a voice answered. Smooth, cultured, nothing like the brutal authority she'd heard through the door. "Miss Hart, I was wondering how long it would take." Evelyn's throat felt like sandpaper. "How did you find me? I've been tracking my son's movements for 30 years. Did you really think a safe house in Lincoln Park would stay hidden?" Salvatore's voice carried quiet amusement. "Vincent is talented, but he's not invisible. Not to me." "What do you want?" "To meet. Face to face. No threats, no violence. Just a conversation between two people who care about Vincent's future." "I don't trust you." "Smart. You shouldn't." Salvatore paused. "But you'll meet with me anyway, because you know Vincent is headed toward a war he can't win, and you're the only person who can stop it." Evelyn closed her eyes. "Where?" "Grant Park, the Buckingham Fountain. 1 hour. Come alone." The line went dead. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, her mind racing. This was insane. Meeting with Salvatore DeLuca was exactly what Vincent had told her not to do. It was dangerous, stupid, potentially suicidal. But Salvatore was right about one thing. Vincent was going to war, and wars had casualties. If there was even a chance she could stop it before blood was spilled, didn't she have to try? Evelyn grabbed her coat and left the safe house before she could talk herself out of it. The fountain was frozen solid, its elaborate tiers covered in ice that gleamed in the afternoon sunlight. Evelyn stood 20 feet away, her breath fogging in the cold air, watching an old man in an expensive black overcoat feed pigeons near the water's edge. Salvatore DeLuca didn't look like a mob boss. He looked like someone's grandfather. Silver hair perfectly combed, clean-shaven face lined with age, wire-rimmed glasses that made him look scholarly. But when he turned and saw Evelyn, his eyes held the same cold intelligence she'd seen in Vincent's. "Miss Hart," he gestured to the bench beside him. "Sit, please." Evelyn stayed standing. "Say what you need to say." Salvatore smiled slightly. "Vincent's stubbornness, you've adopted it already." He scattered more seeds for the pigeons. "Very well. I'll be direct. My son is in love with you, and that love is going to destroy him." "That's not—" "Don't insult my intelligence by lying." Salvatore's voice stayed calm. "I've watched Vincent operate for 15 years. I know every tell, every weakness, every crack in his armor. And you, Miss Hart, are the biggest crack he's ever shown." Evelyn's hands curled into fists inside her pockets. "If you're trying to scare me into leaving, you're wasting your time. Vincent already told me the risks." "Did he tell you about Chicago in 2019? The question came out of nowhere. Evelyn frowned. "What?" 7 years ago. Vincent fell in love with someone else, a lawyer named Catherine Morales. Brilliant woman, beautiful, kind. Salvatore's expression didn't change. "She lasted 6 months before our enemies figured out she mattered to him. They kidnapped her, tortured her for 3 days trying to get information about our operations. When Vincent finally found her, she was barely alive." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "What happened to her?" "She survived, physically." Salvatore finally looked at Evelyn directly. But the psychological damage was permanent. She couldn't sleep, couldn't work, couldn't function. Last I heard, she was in a psychiatric facility in Arizona, still there, still broken. And Vincent carries that guilt like a cross he can't put down. The words hit Evelyn like a physical blow. Vincent had never mentioned Catherine, had never hinted that this had happened before. "Why are you telling me this?" she whispered. "Because history repeats itself. And this time, Vincent's enemies won't be as merciful." Salvatore stood up, brushing seeds from his coat. "My son has made powerful people very angry. The hospital raids, the disrupted operations, the protected witnesses. Vincent's sense of justice has cost certain individuals millions of dollars and dozens of arrests. They've been waiting for an opportunity to strike back. And you, Miss Hart, are that opportunity. Vincent can protect me. No, he can't. Salvatore's voice turned hard. He couldn't protect Catherine. He couldn't protect his sister. And he won't be able to protect you when they come. Because the moment he chose you over the Empire, he made himself weak, vulnerable, human. And in our world, humanity is a death sentence. Evelyn forced herself to breathe. What do you want from me? Leave. Tonight. I'll give you money. New identity. A fresh start somewhere Vincent's world can't touch you. Salvatore pulled an envelope from his coat. $200,000. Cash. Enough to disappear and build a real life. All you have to do is walk away. The envelope hung between them like a grenade. Evelyn stared at it. $200,000. More money than she'd see in 10 years of minimum wage jobs. Enough to pay off her student loans. Enough to finish school. Enough to start over somewhere safe. All she had to do was abandon Vincent. And if I don't take it? She asked quietly. Salvatore's expression turned cold. Then you'll watch my son die trying to save you. And when he's dead, his enemies will come for you anyway, except there'll be no one left to protect you. You'll suffer, you'll break, and eventually you'll die alone in a place far worse than that alley where Vincent found you. You're his father. Evelyn's voice shook with fury. How can you talk about him dying like it's just business? Because it is business. I built this empire on pragmatism, not sentiment. Vincent wants to burn it down for love. That makes him a liability. Salvatore stepped closer. I'm giving you a chance to save his life. Take the money, disappear, send him a message that you couldn't handle his world, break his heart cleanly. He'll rage for a while. He'll drink. He'll make stupid decisions, but eventually he'll remember who he is. He'll rebuild his focus. He'll survive. And if I stay, then you're both dead within a month, maybe less. Evelyn's mind spun. Every instinct screamed that Salvatore was manipulating her, playing on her fears, trying to separate her from Vincent so he could control his son again. But what if he wasn't lying? What if Catherine Morales was real? What if Vincent really had watched someone he loved get destroyed because of him? What if staying meant condemning them both? I need time to think, Evelyn said. You have until midnight. After that, the offer disappears. Salvatore placed the envelope on the bench. Choose wisely, Miss Hart. Your life depends on it. So does my son's. He walked away without looking back, leaving Evelyn alone beside a frozen fountain with $200,000 and an impossible decision. She didn't take the money. Not yet. Instead, she called the one person who might tell her the truth. Dr. Reeves answered on the third ring. Evelyn, Jesus, where are you? Vincent's been losing his mind. Was there a woman named Catherine Morales? Silence on the other end. Then quietly, where did you hear that name? Salvatore told me. Is it true? Did Vincent fall in love with her? Did she get hurt because of him? Reeves exhaled hard. Yeah, it's true. Catherine was good for him. Made him softer, more human. Then the Castellano family found out about her. Used her as leverage. By the time Vincent got her back, he trailed off. She never recovered. Vincent blamed himself. Swore he'd never let anyone get close again. Until me. Until you. Reeves's voice turned gentle. Evelyn, whatever Salvatore told you, whatever he's offering you, don't trust it. That man doesn't do anything that doesn't serve his interests. He's offering me money to leave, to disappear. He says it's the only way to keep Vincent alive. And you believe him? I don't know what to believe anymore. Evelyn's voice cracked. But I know I don't want Vincent to die because of me. I don't want to be another Catherine. Then don't run. Catherine ran afterward because the trauma broke her. But you're still standing, still fighting. That's what Vincent needs. Reeves paused. He's on his way to confront Salvatore right now, tonight, at the old DeLuca estate. If you're going to make a choice, make it before he gets there. Because once that door closes, there's no going back. The line went dead. Evelyn looked at the envelope on the bench. $200,000. Freedom. Safety. A chance to live without looking over her shoulder. Or Vincent. The man who saved her life, who saw her as human when everyone else saw her as invisible, who was willing to burn his entire world down rather than lose her. The choice should have been obvious. But standing in Grant Park with the winter wind cutting through her coat and Salvatore's warning echoing in her head, Evelyn realized the truth. There was no good choice. Only different kinds of destruction. She picked up the envelope, felt its weight. Then she shoved it in her pocket and started running. The DeLuca estate sat on 10 acres in Oak Park, hidden behind iron gates and old money trees. Evelyn arrived in a taxi she'd hailed on Lakeshore Drive, her heart hammering against her ribs. The gates were open. The driveway was empty except for Vincent's Escalade parked near the front entrance. She was too late. Evelyn ran toward this house. The front door stood open. Inside she could hear voices, shouting, the crash of something breaking. She followed the sound to a study lined with leather-bound books and oil paintings of men who looked like older versions of Salvatore. Vincent stood in the center of the room, his face carved from rage. Salvatore sat behind a massive oak desk, perfectly calm. "You don't get to make that decision," Vincent was saying. "You don't get to threaten her. You don't get to offer her money to leave. She's not part of your games. She became part of my games the moment you made her important to you." Salvatore's voice stayed level. "You're repeating Catherine's mistake, and you're too blind to see it." Catherine was different. Catherine was exactly the same, a good woman caught in our world, a liability you couldn't afford. The only difference is Evelyn hasn't been broken yet, but she will be. And when she is, you'll carry that guilt along with all the others. Vincent's hands curled into fists. "I won't let that happen." "You can't stop it." Salvatore stood up. "You're a DeLuca, Vincent. We don't get happy endings. We don't get love. We get power and blood and the knowledge that everyone we care about eventually becomes a weapon someone else uses against us. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you can start making rational decisions again." "Rational decisions?" Vincent's laugh was bitter. "You mean the decisions that turned you into a lonely old man surrounded by people who fear you and nobody who loves you? That's not rational. That's tragic. That's survival. That's cowardice." The word dropped like a bomb. Salvatore's expression finally cracked. His eyes went cold, hard. "Watch yourself, boy." "Or what? You'll send more guys to beat me up? You'll make more calls to the police? You'll threaten more people I care about?" Vincent stepped closer to the desk. "I'm done playing your games. I'm done pretending the Empire is more important than having something real in my life. You can accept that, or you can get out of my way. And if I don't," Vincent's voice dropped to something deadly, "then we find out who's really in charge of Chicago." Father and son stared at each other across the desk. Years of tension, decades of unspoken resentment, a lifetime of violence barely contained. Evelyn knew she should have announced herself, should have stepped into the room and stopped this before it became irreversible. But she couldn't move, couldn't speak, could only watch as the two most dangerous men in Chicago prepared to destroy each other. Salvatore spoke first. "You want war? Fine, we'll have war." He pressed a button on his desk phone. "But understand this. I built this empire from nothing. I've survived challenges from better men than you. And I will not let my son's infatuation with some random girl burn down everything I've created." The study door behind Vincent burst open. 6 men in dark suits entered, moving with military precision. Vincent spun around, his hand moving toward the gun under his jacket. "Don't!" Salvatore's voice was ice. "You pull that weapon, they'll put you down before you get off a shot. And I'd rather not clean your blood off my carpet." Vincent's hand froze. His eyes swept across the 6 men, calculating odds he couldn't win. "This is how it's going to work," Salvatore continued. "You're going to leave this house. You're going to go back to running your operations, and you're going to stay away from Evelyn Hart permanently." "No." "Then you're a dead man." Salvatore's expression didn't change. "I'll make it quick. Professional. A car accident. A mugging gone wrong. Something that doesn't trace back to family. You'll just be another statistic in a violent city." Vincent's jaw tightened. "You'd kill your own son?" "I'd kill the liability my son has become. There's a difference." Salvatore sat back down. "Last chance, Vincent. Walk away from the girl, or die protecting her. Your choice." The room went silent. The 6 men stood ready. Salvatore waited. Vincent stood frozen between impossible options, and Evelyn finally found her voice. "Stop!" Every head turned toward her. Vincent's eyes went wide with horror. Evelyn, what the hell are you? I'll take the money. She walked into the study, pulling Salvatore's envelope from her pocket. 200,000, new identity, fresh start. I'll leave tonight. I'll send Vincent a message that I couldn't handle his world. I'll break it off cleanly. Vincent looked like she'd shot him. No, Evelyn, no. It's already decided. She couldn't look at him, couldn't see the betrayal in his eyes. Your father's right. I don't belong in this world. I never did. I was just trying to survive, and this is how I survive. You're lying, Vincent's voice cracked. I know you. You wouldn't. You don't know me. Evelyn forced the words out. You know who you wanted me to be, someone strong enough to handle your life. But I'm not. I'm just a broke college student who got in over her head, and I want out. The lie tasted like poison. But Evelyn pushed through it, keeping her expression neutral while her heart shattered inside her chest. Salvatore smiled. A wise decision, Miss Hart. Painful, but wise. Evelyn. Vincent moved toward her. One of Salvatore's men blocked his path. Evelyn, look at me, please. She couldn't. If she looked at him, she'd break. She'd confess the lie. She'd ruin the only chance she had to save his life. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Then she turned and walked out of the study, out of the house, out of Vincent DeLuca's life. Behind her, she heard Vincent's voice rising, shouting, demanding they let him follow her. The sound of a struggle, Salvatore's calm orders to restrain him. Evelyn kept walking, tears streaming down her face, the envelope heavy in her pocket, her heart breaking with every step. She made it to the end of the driveway before she collapsed against the iron gates, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. She'd done it. She'd saved Vincent's life by destroying his heart. It was the right choice. It felt like dying. A car pulled up beside her, black sedan, tinted windows. The back door opened and Salvatore's voice came from inside. Get in. I'll have my driver take you to the airport. There's a ticket waiting for you. Phoenix. New identity packet will be delivered to your hotel tomorrow morning. Evelyn wiped her face and climbed into the car. The door closed. The sedan pulled away from the estate. She watched through the rear window as Vincent's Escalade disappeared behind the trees. Watched the gates close. Watched her entire world shrink into nothing. Salvatore sat across from her, his expression unreadable. You did the right thing, he said quietly. It doesn't feel right. It never does. That's how you know it mattered. Salvatore pulled out his phone. My son will hate you for a while. He'll drink, he'll rage, he'll make mistakes, but eventually he'll remember who he is, who he needs to be. And he'll thank you for this. Someday. Evelyn didn't respond. Couldn't respond. Her throat was too tight with grief. The sedan drove toward O'Hare International Airport. Chicago blurred past the windows. The city that had nearly killed her, saved her, and now exiled her. Evelyn closed her eyes and tried to remember what Vincent's face looked like when he smiled. When he'd kissed her in the back of the Escalade. When he'd promised she'd be okay. She'd broken that promise. She'd saved his life by breaking both their hearts, and now she had to live with it. The car stopped at a red light. Evelyn's hand moved to the door handle. She could run, could disappear on her own terms, could refuse Salvatore's blood money and figure out another way. But then what? Vincent would still be in danger. Salvatore would still be hunting her. And next time there might not be a choice. Just violence and death and the confirmation of every warning she'd been given. The light turned green. The car moved forward. Evelyn's hand fell away from the door. An hour later, she sat in O'Hare's departure terminal, holding a boarding pass to Phoenix and a phone that had one unread message. From Vincent. Her hand shook as she opened it. I don't believe you. I don't believe you wanted to leave. I don't believe you chose money over what we had. So I'm giving you one chance to tell me the truth. Meet me at the place we first talked. Midnight. If you don't show, I'll know Salvatore got to you, and I'll burn his entire world down to find you. Your choice, Evelyn. Run or fight, but don't lie to me again. Evelyn stared at the message. Her flight boarded in 20 minutes. Phoenix waited. Safety waited. A new life waited. But Vincent was offering her something else. A chance to fight. A chance to stop running. A chance to bet everything on the possibility that love could survive in a world built on violence. The boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. Evelyn looked at her ticket, looked at her phone, looked at the departure gate. Then she stood up, threw the ticket in the trash, and walked out of the airport. She had a midnight meeting to make, and a mafia boss to save from his own father. The clinic where Vincent had saved Evelyn's life looked different at midnight. The hallways were dark except for emergency lighting that cast everything in shades of red and shadow. The building felt abandoned, like even the ghosts had decided to stay away tonight. Evelyn stood in the recovery room where she'd first woken up 3 months ago, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. She'd thrown away the ticket to Phoenix, walked out of the airport, taken a taxi back into the city with money she didn't have, promising the driver she'd pay him when they arrived. He'd looked at her tear-stained face and watery eyes and let her ride anyway. Now she waited in the silence, watching the door, wondering if Vincent would actually show up, or if his message had been a test she'd already failed by running to the airport in the first place. The door opened at 12:01. Vincent stood in the doorway, backlit by the red emergency lights. He looked like hell. His shirt was torn. Blood stained his knuckles. A fresh bruise darkened his jaw. But his eyes were alert, burning, alive with fury and something that looked dangerously close to hope. "You came," he said quietly. Evelyn's voice shook. "I almost didn't." "But you did." Vincent stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. "Why?" "Because I'm tired of running, tired of being scared, tired of letting other people make my decisions for me." Evelyn took a breath. "And because everything I said at your father's house was a lie." Vincent went very still. "What?" "Salvatore found me at the safe house. He told me about Catherine Morales. He offered me money to disappear. He said if I stayed, we'd both die." The words tumbled out faster now. "And I believed him. I thought the only way to save your life was to break your heart. So I took the money and I went to the airport and I was going to leave." "But you didn't." "No. Because somewhere between the airport and here, I realized something." Evelyn met his eyes. "Your father's been controlling you your entire life, using fear and guilt and manipulation to keep you in line. And I almost let him use me the same way, almost let him turn me into another weapon he could use against you." Vincent's expression was unreadable. "So you came back to what? Defy him?" "I came back because I love you." Evelyn's voice broke. "And I'm done letting anyone tell me that's wrong or weak or dangerous. Maybe it is all those things, but it's also real, and I'd rather die fighting for something real than live running from it." The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. Then Vincent crossed the room in 3 strides and kissed her. It was different from the desperate kiss in the Escalade. This one was slower, deeper, tasted like relief and fury, and promises neither of them knew if they could keep. Evelyn's hands fisted in his torn shirt, feeling his heart hammering against her palms. Vincent's fingers tangled in her hair, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent pressed his forehead against hers. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered. "When you walked out of that study, I thought, I know, I'm sorry. Don't apologize for trying to save my life, even if it was the stupidest, most self-sacrificing thing you could have done." Vincent's hands cupped her face. "But Evelyn, you need to understand something. Salvatore wasn't entirely wrong. Staying with me is dangerous. People will use you against me. They'll hurt you to hurt me. And I can't promise I'll always be able to stop them." "I know. And you're still choosing this?" Evelyn looked at the man who'd pulled her from a frozen alley and inadvertently dragged her into a war between empires. The man who ran illegal hospitals to save people the system had abandoned. The man who'd been willing to burn his entire world down rather than lose her. "I'm choosing you," she said. "Whatever that means. Whatever it costs." Vincent's eyes closed briefly. When they opened again, they held a determination that made Evelyn's breath catch. "Then we do this right. No more hiding. No more pretending you're just an employee working off a debt. No more letting Salvatore dictate our lives." His voice turned hard. "We end this tonight." "How?" Vincent pulled out his phone and made a call. "Marco, gather everyone. I mean, everyone. Every soldier, every associate, every person who owes loyalty to the DeLuca name. Have them meet at the warehouse on Ashland in 1 hour. He ended the call and looked at Evelyn. I'm calling a sit-down. Forcing Salvatore to face me in front of the entire organization. He can't have me killed in front of witnesses. Too many questions, too much instability. So he'll have to negotiate. And if he doesn't, then I take control of the family by force. It'll mean civil war, blood, chaos. But it'll be done in the open instead of in shadows. Vincent's jaw tightened. I'm tired of playing his games. Time to end them. An hour later, the warehouse on Ashland Avenue was packed with men in expensive suits and faces hardened by violence. Evelyn stood beside Vincent near a makeshift stage built from shipping pallets, her heart pounding as she watched Chicago's criminal elite filter in through the loading dock doors. She recognized some faces from the hospital. Others were complete strangers. All of them looked dangerous. Dr. Reeves appeared beside her, his expression grim. You sure about this? Evelyn wasn't sure about anything. Do I have a choice? There's always a choice. The question is whether you can live with the consequences. Before Evelyn could respond, a black Mercedes pulled up outside. Salvatore De Luca stepped out, flanked by 6 bodyguards. He walked into the warehouse like he owned it, which, technically, he did. His eyes swept across the crowd, cataloging faces, reading loyalties. When his gaze landed on Vincent and Evelyn standing together, his expression hardened. Vincent, Salvatore's voice carried across the warehouse. What's the meaning of this circus? Vincent stepped forward onto the makeshift stage. The meaning is simple. I'm done taking orders from you. Done letting you control my life. Done pretending the Empire is more important than being human. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Salvatore's bodyguards tensed, but the old man just smiled coldly. You're making a mistake. No, you made the mistake. Vincent's voice cut through the warehouse. You built this empire on fear and control. You taught me that caring about anyone was weakness, that love made you vulnerable, that the only thing that mattered was power. He paused. But you were wrong. Power without purpose is just violence, and violence without restraint is just chaos. Spare me the philosophy lesson. This isn't philosophy. This is fact. Vincent gestured to the crowd. Look around. How many of these men actually respect you? How many are here out of loyalty versus fear? How many would follow you if they had a choice? Salvatore's expression darkened. Careful, boy. I'm not your boy anymore. I'm the man who runs your hospitals, who protects your operations, who keeps the politicians paid and the police looking the other way. And I'm telling you right now, in front of everyone, that I'm done following your rules. The warehouse went dead silent. Even the bodyguards looked uncertain. Salvatore's voice dropped to something deadly. And what exactly do you propose instead? Simple. You step down, retire, disappear to your estate, and count your money in peace. And I take full control of the De Luca operations with no interference from you. Ever. Salvatore laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. You think these men will follow you? You think they'll trust a leader who's willing to risk everything for some girl he picked up off the street? They'll follow someone who gives a damn about more than just profit margins. Vincent's voice turned hard. I've built hospitals that save lives. I've protected families. I've made sure people in this organization get treated when they're hurt, get paid when they're loyal, get protected when they're vulnerable. What have you done except sit in your mansion and count bodies? Several men in the crowd nodded. Others exchanged glances. The tide was shifting, and everyone could feel it. Salvatore's jaw tightened. You're forcing my hand. I'm giving you an out. Take it while you still can. And if I refuse? Vincent pulled a gun from his jacket and placed it on the shipping pallet beside him. The gesture was deliberate, symbolic. Then we settle this the old way. Right here, right now. And whoever walks out of this warehouse runs Chicago. Evelyn's blood turned to ice. This was insane. Vincent was challenging his own father to a duel in front of the entire criminal organization. If Salvatore accepted, one of them would die tonight. But Salvatore just stared at the gun, his expression unreadable. Then he did something Evelyn didn't expect. He laughed again, genuinely this time. You really are my son, he said quietly, stubborn, reckless, willing to burn everything down for what you believe in. He turned to address the crowd. Vincent thinks I'm weak, that I've lost touch with what matters. Maybe he's right. Maybe I have spent too many years behind a desk making decisions without considering their human cost. He walked toward the stage slowly, his bodyguard staying back. When he reached Vincent, father and son stood face to face. But here's what you don't understand yet, Salvatore continued. The reason I've survived 40 years in this business isn't because I'm heartless. It's because I know when to fold, when to recognize that holding on to power costs more than it's worth. He glanced at Evelyn. Your girl came back. She threw away my money and my protection to stand beside you. That takes either courage or stupidity. Maybe both. He turned back to Vincent. I tried to save you from making the same mistakes I did, from losing someone you loved because of this life. But you're right about one thing. I became so focused on protecting you from pain that I forgot to let you live. The warehouse had gone completely silent. Everyone was watching, waiting. Salvatore's next words shocked them all. I'm stepping down, effective immediately. Vincent DeLuca is now the head of this family. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally. The crowd erupted. Some men cheered. Others looked stunned. A few started arguing, but Salvatore's voice cut through the chaos. Quiet. The old man's authority hadn't diminished despite his abdication. I'm not dead. I'm not disappearing, but I'm done making decisions for this organization. Vincent's in charge now. You follow his orders. You answer to him. And if anyone tries to undermine him, you'll answer to me. Understood? Grudging nods, muttered agreements. No one dared openly defy Salvatore even as he handed over control. The old man turned back to Vincent. His expression was complicated, proud and regretful and tired all at once. Don't make me regret this, he said quietly. Vincent's voice was equally quiet. I won't. Salvatore glanced at Evelyn one more time. Take care of him, Miss Hart. He's going to need someone to remind him he's human, because this job will try to make him forget. Then he walked out of the warehouse, his bodyguards following. The Mercedes drove away, leaving Vincent standing on the makeshift stage with an entire criminal empire now under his control. The crowd waited for him to speak. Vincent looked out at the faces staring back at him. Then he looked at Evelyn. She nodded slightly, giving him permission to do what came next. He took her hand and pulled her up onto the stage beside him. Most of you know who this is, Vincent said. Evelyn Hart. 3 months ago, I found her dying in an alley. I saved her life. Then I made her work off the medical debt. Then I fell in love with her. He paused. And that love almost got us both killed because my father saw it as weakness. Uncomfortable shifting in the crowd. These were men who lived by the same code Salvatore had taught Vincent. Love was weakness. Attachment was liability. But here's what I learned, Vincent continued. Love isn't what makes you weak. Fear is. And for too long, this organization has been run on fear. Fear of betrayal. Fear of showing vulnerability. Fear of being human. His voice grew stronger. That ends now. Under my leadership, we protect our own. We take care of families. We run clean operations. We don't hurt innocent people. And we don't punish loyalty. He squeezed Evelyn's hand. This woman is under my protection. Permanently. Anyone who threatens her threatens me. Anyone who hurts her will answer to me personally. And I won't be as forgiving as my father was. The message was clear, absolute. One of the older soldiers in the crowd spoke up. And what about the operations? The hospitals? The territory agreements? Nothing changes except the brutality. We still run the hospitals. We still protect our territories. We still make money. But we do it without terrorizing the neighborhoods we operate in. We do it with some semblance of honor. Vincent's expression hardened. Anyone who can't handle that can leave. Now. No hard feelings. But if you stay, you follow my rules. Several men exchanged glances, then one by one they nodded, some enthusiastically, others reluctantly. But no one walked out. Vincent had won. Not through violence or intimidation, but through the simple act of being honest about who he was and what he wanted. The meeting dispersed slowly. Men approached Vincent to pledge loyalty, to ask questions, to position themselves for the new regime. Dr. Reeves appeared with Marco, both of them wearing expressions of cautious relief. That was either the smartest thing you've ever done or the stupidest, Reeves said. We'll find out which in about 6 months. Vincent smiled slightly. Probably both. Marco nodded at Evelyn. Welcome to the family, Miss Hart. For real this time. Evelyn didn't know what to say to that. She just nodded back, feeling overwhelmed and exhausted and strangely hopeful all at once. By 3 in the morning, the warehouse was empty except for Vincent and Evelyn. They sat on the edge of the stage, shoulders touching, watching the sunrise begin to paint the Chicago skyline through the loading dock doors. "What happens now?" Evelyn asked quietly. Vincent was silent for a moment. Then, "Now we figure out how to build something that doesn't require us to destroy ourselves in the process." "Think that's possible?" "I have no idea." He looked at her. "But I'm willing to find out if you are." Evelyn thought about the last 3 months. The alley, the hospital, the debt, the fear, the violence, the love that had grown despite every reason it shouldn't have. "I'm in," she said. "Whatever comes next." Vincent kissed her temple. "Then let's go home." They drove through Chicago as the sun rose, painting the frozen city in shades of gold and rose. The Escalade moved through empty streets, passing the alley where Vincent had found Evelyn, passing the hospital where she'd worked off her debt, passing all the places that had marked their impossible journey from strangers to something neither of them had expected. Vincent took her to his penthouse downtown, a place Evelyn had never seen. It was elegant and cold and felt nothing like a home, but Vincent led her to the master bedroom and they collapsed on the bed fully clothed, too exhausted to do anything but hold each other. "We should probably talk about logistics," Vincent mumbled against her hair. "Where you'll live, what your role in the organization will be, how we handle security." "Later," Evelyn whispered. "Right now I just want to sleep next to you and pretend the world doesn't exist." "Deal." They slept through most of the day. When Evelyn finally woke, afternoon light was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Vincent was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring out at the city. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Too much to think about." He glanced back at her. "Salvatore called. He's leaving for Italy tomorrow. Says he wants to see where his father came from before he's too old to travel." "How do you feel about that?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment. "Relieved, sad. Grateful he didn't make me kill him to get free." He rubbed his face. "He's not a good man, Evelyn. He's done terrible things. But he's still my father. And some part of me will always love him despite everything." Evelyn sat up and wrapped her arms around Vincent from behind. "You don't have to choose between loving him and being your own person. Those things can coexist. Can they?" "They have to. Otherwise, we're all just prisoners of our worst moments." Vincent turned and pulled her into his lap. "When did you get so wise?" "Somewhere between freezing to death and falling in love with a mafia boss." Evelyn smiled slightly. "Trauma builds character." Vincent laughed. Actually laughed. It was the first genuine sound of joy Evelyn had heard from him, and it transformed his entire face. "I love you," he said, "in case I haven't made that abundantly clear. I love you too, even though you're completely insane and have terrible taste in careers." Says the woman who chose to stay. Touché. They spent the rest of the day making plans. Vincent officially cleared Evelyn's debt and offered her a real position overseeing patient services at all the DeLuca medical facilities. She'd have an actual salary, actual benefits, and actual authority to make changes that could help people. "You're sure about this?" Evelyn asked. "Giving me that much responsibility? You've been doing the work anyway. Might as well make it official." Vincent's expression turned serious. "But Evelyn, I need you to understand something. This isn't a normal job. You'll see things that will disturb you. You'll meet people who've done terrible things. You'll have to make decisions that exist in moral gray areas." "I know." "And you're okay with that?" Evelyn thought about the gunshot victim she'd processed. The teenage boy whose report had almost destroyed everything. All the patients who came through those floors desperate and broken and invisible to the rest of the world. "I'm okay with trying to help people in a system that's abandoned them," she said carefully. "Even if the methods aren't perfect. Even if it means working in gray areas. Because someone has to care. And if that someone is us, then that's what it is." Vincent kissed her. "You're going to change everything, you know that?" "Good. Everything could use some changing." 6 months later, Evelyn stood in the newly renovated lobby of Mercy General's 5th floor. The space had been completely transformed. New paint, new furniture, new equipment that actually worked, and most importantly, new protocols that treated patients with dignity regardless of their ability to pay. She'd fought for every change, argued with administrators who didn't want to upset the status quo. convinced Vincent to invest more money into patient care instead of just operational costs, hired staff who actually cared about helping people instead of just collecting paychecks. It had been exhausting and frustrating and the most meaningful work Evelyn had ever done. Angela walked up beside her, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You've been staring at that wall for 10 minutes. What are you thinking about?" Evelyn accepted the coffee. "How different everything looks now. Different good or different bad? Different real?" Evelyn smiled slightly. 6 months ago, I was drowning in debt and barely surviving. Now I'm running medical operations for a criminal empire and dating the most dangerous man in Chicago. My life has become completely unrecognizable." Angela snorted. "Dating, that's a polite way to put it." "What would you call it?" "A goddamn miracle." Angela's expression softened. "You know what the staff calls you behind your back? The girl who tamed Vincent DeLuca. Like you're some kind of magician who turned a monster into a man. That's not fair to him. He was always a man. He just forgot for a while." "Maybe. But you helped him remember. And in the process, you made this place better, safer, more human." Angela gestured at the bustling lobby. "Look at this. Actually, look. We're treating twice as many patients as we did 6 months ago. Our survival rates are up, complaints are down, and people are actually talking about Mercy General like it's a place that gives a damn." Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes. "We still have so much work to do." "We always will. That's the job." Angela squeezed her shoulder. "But you should be proud of what you've built here." "I am." Before Evelyn could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from Vincent. "Roof, now. Bring a coat." Evelyn excused herself and took the elevator to the top floor, then climbed the maintenance stairs to the roof access. Chicago spread out below in every direction, the city lights beginning to glow as evening approached. Vincent stood near the edge, hands in his pockets, looking out at the skyline. When he heard her approach, he turned and smiled. "Come here. I want to show you something." Evelyn walked to the edge and followed his gaze. At first she didn't see anything unusual, just Chicago being Chicago. Then Vincent pointed toward the south side. "See that building? The one with the blue lights? Yeah, that's the new clinic. Opens next month. State of the art. Free services for anyone who needs them. No questions asked." Vincent's voice held quiet pride. "We're calling it the Heart Medical Center." Evelyn's breath caught. "You named it after me? After you. After my sister. After everyone who deserved better than what they got." Vincent turned to face her. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about using power to protect instead of control, about building something that matters. And I realize that's what I want my legacy to be. Not fear, not violence, but places like this, systems that actually help people." Evelyn's eyes burned with tears. "Vincent, I'm not finished." He pulled a small box from his pocket. "I know this is probably too fast. I know we've only been together 6 months. I know we're both still figuring out how to exist in the same world without destroying each other. But Evelyn, I don't want to wait. I don't want to pretend there's any version of my future that doesn't include you in it." He opened the box. Inside was a ring. Simple. Elegant. Perfect. "Marry me," Vincent said quietly. "Not because it's practical or strategic or makes sense politically. Marry me because I love you, because you make me want to be better, because when I look at you, I see everything I could be instead of everything I've been." Evelyn couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, could only stare at this man who'd saved her life and inadvertently given her a purpose she'd never known she needed. "Yes," she finally whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Vincent slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her close and kissed her while the Chicago sunset painted the sky in shades of fire and gold. When they finally broke apart, both of them were crying. "We're going to have to deal with so much scrutiny," Evelyn said through her tears, "from your organization, from my family, from everyone who thinks this is insane." "Let them think what they want." Vincent's voice was absolute. "You're mine, I'm yours. Everything else is just noise." They stood on the roof for a long time, holding each other while the city transitioned from day to night below them. The city that had nearly killed Evelyn. The city Vincent controlled through a network of fear and power. The city they were both trying to transform into something better. It wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, enemies, setbacks. Moments when the violence of Vincent's world threatened to consume everything good they'd built. But standing there on that roof with the ring on her finger and Vincent's arms around her, Evelyn felt something she hadn't felt since her parents died. Hope. 3 months later, they were married in a small ceremony at the Heart Medical Center. Dr. Reeves officiated. Angela cried. Marco stood as Vincent's best man. Salvatore sent his blessing from Italy, but didn't attend, knowing his presence would overshadow everything. Evelyn wore a simple white dress she'd bought at a thrift store. Vincent wore his usual black suit. They said their vows in front of the people who'd helped them survive. The nurses, the patients, the staff who'd watched their impossible love story unfold. When Vincent kissed his bride, the small crowd erupted in applause. Later, at the reception held in the clinic's renovated cafeteria, Evelyn found herself standing beside Angela near the dessert table. "You did it," Angela said quietly. "You actually survived being loved by Vincent DeLuca." Evelyn smiled. "We survived each other. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yeah." Evelyn watched Vincent across the room, laughing at something Marco had said. "Surviving him would mean I was just a victim of his world. But surviving each other means we both changed, both grew, both became people who could exist together without destroying each other." Angela clinked her glass against Evelyn's. "To survival, then, the messy, complicated, beautiful kind. To survival." The party lasted until midnight. When everyone finally left, Vincent and Evelyn stood alone in the empty cafeteria, surrounded by discarded decorations and half-eaten cake. "Ready to go home?" Vincent asked. Evelyn looked around at the clinic that had become so much more than just a workplace. "I am home. This place, you, the work we're doing, this is home." Vincent pulled her close. "Then let's build it into something that lasts." And they did. Over the next year, the DeLuca Medical Network expanded. 3 new clinics opened across Chicago. Patient services improved across the board. The organization's reputation slowly shifted from pure criminal enterprise to something more complex. Still operating in gray areas, still making money through questionable means, but also genuinely helping people who had nowhere else to turn. Evelyn became the face of that transformation. She testified before city councils about healthcare access. She wrote grants for funding. She hired staff who'd been written off by traditional medical systems. She turned the DeLuca medical facilities into places where dignity mattered as much as treatment. And Vincent supported every step. He used his power to protect her work, used his money to fund her initiatives, used his influence to open doors that would have stayed closed otherwise. They fought, of course, about priorities, about risks, about how much of Vincent's criminal operations Evelyn could tolerate versus how much she demanded he change. But they always came back to each other, always remembered that they'd chosen this complicated life together. 2 years after their wedding, Evelyn stood in that same alley where Vincent had found her. It was spring now. The snow had melted, flowers pushed through cracks in the pavement. The city looked almost beautiful. Vincent appeared beside her, his hand finding hers automatically. "Why are we here?" he asked. "Because I needed to see it again. The place where everything changed." Evelyn squeezed his hand. 2 years ago, I was dying right here, alone, invisible. One more statistic in a city that didn't care. And now I'm alive, seen, married to a man who gave me a reason to keep fighting. She turned to face him. "You saved my life, Vincent, not just by pulling me out of the snow, but by showing me that surviving and living are 2 different things." Vincent's eyes held hers with an intensity that still made her breath catch. "You saved mine too. I just didn't realize I needed saving until you showed up." They stood in that alley for a long time, remembering where they'd started and acknowledging how far they'd come. The frozen night that had brought them together. The violence that had nearly torn them apart. The love that had somehow survived despite every reason it shouldn't have. When they finally left, walking hand in hand back toward the Escalade waiting at the curb, Evelyn looked back one more time. That alley had been her ending, but it had also been her beginning. And sometimes she thought the most beautiful stories started in the darkest places. If you were willing to fight your way toward the light,